Okay, let's choose up. I'll take Jamal and Tutal. You can have Chubbs and Skippy. Let's go. My ball.
Okay. But you got skins.
Not a good negotiator? You don't have to be a good negotiator at McCarthy Chevrolet. McCarthy guarantees the lowest prices on a new Chevy or we'll pay you $10,000. We guarantee there's no need to shop anyplace else. McCarthy Chevrolet, I-35 and Santa Fe, Olathe.
Welcome back, Sports Radio 810 WHB's Track Talk with the Racinboys, again from Racinboys HQ in the McCarthy Auto Group studios. Joining us now is friend of the Racinboys, Lee Spencer from FoxSports.com. Lee, how you doing this morning?
I'm great. How are you guys?
We're doing good. Thanks for getting up early, and we know you've got some plans coming up, so we'll keep you just for a short period of time. We appreciate you taking the time to be on the show, but there's so much going on. One of the busier weeks when it comes to news. And I guess the first thing that we should talk about is the driver that's going to replace Denny Hamlin. Originally, it was Mark Martin. Now that role has changed. It looks like Aaron's just stepped in and says, you know what, we're spending a lot of money on marketing Mark Martin. This isn't going to work for us. What do you know?
Well, I don't think anybody really checked with the sponsor to find out what the deal was.
How's that happen?
Who knows? I think that, given the circumstances, they just kind of all agreed to help out the 11th car, but it was like, well, wait a second, we're 14th in owner points. What the heck are we doing here? Because, there's always the potential, as we saw last year. I mean, there very well could be an owner's championship, and you saw where Mark Martin was last year. I mean, the points are so screwy right now that with the way the chase is set up, all you have to do is finish in the top 20 and, win a couple of races, and you could probably get into the chase. Everybody was sitting there working on the scenarios for can Denny Hamlin still, qualify for the chase for the Sprint Cup, and little did they know that why they were figuring that, or, whether or not they could win a champion, the owner's championship. Nobody bothered saying, hey, Aaron, you've had a relationship with Michael Waltrip since 2000, but did anybody call the offices in Atlanta to find out if this was okay and we could borrow your driver? Because at that point, then it's looking like, well, what are we, chopped liver over here?
Right, exactly. So what happened originally, Sadler was tagged as the guy. That was the rumor out there. That turned out to be, that was just too quick, right?
No, well, I mean, who said it was Sadler? Did somebody, was there an official report that it was Sadler?
Right.
I never saw an official report from a legitimate news source that said Sadler was getting the nod. I mean, quite frankly, and as I laid out the other day, the three candidates that I put out were Elliott, Brian Vickers, and Mark Martin. Mm-hmm. And then I listed what their stats were for Martinsville, and overall, Mark wipes the floor with both of them, first of all, as you might imagine. Mm-hmm. Mark's in a whole different class of the other two drivers. Vickers and Elliott are both under contract to Joe Gibbs Racing. They compete in the Nationwide Series. Brian Vickers, on the other side, did an admirable job as a co-driver with Mark Martin in a limited basis. They kept that, that car high up in the owner points. I mean, it wasn't, chase worthy, but they did one heck of a job.
Right.
But when you look at it and say to Aaron's, okay, what driver do we need to bring in that is going to keep you here and make you happy? And you put Mark Martin on the table, and then something like this happens, it's like, well, hold on a second, how about Brian Vickers? And you don't clear it with corporate, and you have to remember these first two races, the one Vickers ran at Bristol and the one at Martinsville next week, Aaron's is not the sponsor of that car for those races. So, there's not the investment in Brian Vickers that there is in Mark Martin, and so you have to take all this stuff into consideration. And I can't believe that Joe Gibbs Racing jumped the gun without making sure that everybody at MWR signed off on it. And what it sounds like to me is that perhaps it was somebody's agent said, hey, this is what, sure, my driver can do this. It's a high-profile car. It's a car that's made the chase ever since, FedEx came
Great
on
opportunity,
board, with Denny Hamlin. And, push came to shove and shove won. So we're looking at Brian Vickers for 5 races instead of Mark Martin.
Yeah, pretty surprised by that. I was listening to Moody on, I think it was Friday. JD was on the show, so, well, it could take up to a couple weeks or maybe next week before we make up our minds. And then it was an hour later, and it was on NASCAR Now that they named the replacement. So I was a little blown away by the timing of all that, to be honest with you. I know
it was, everything just really came together, goofy fast, and for them not having somebody. I mean, I was told, I guess it was whenever I wrote the article, I did it some taking around and heard there were 3 seats. They had 3 seats configured to go in the 11 car, and it was the 3 candidates that I listed. Now, not to belittle Elliott Sadler, but the guy's 38 years old, and when was the last time he was up on the wheel?
Right.
He's made 1 chase berth. If you're FedEx, with the kind of commitment you've made to Joe Gibbs Racing, you want a wheelman. You want somebody whose elbows up and is going to push that car to keep them up front. Denny Hamlin was one of the highest-rated drivers in the Joyce Julius numbers last year, and Joyce Julius looks at all sponsorship mentions and views on TV,
Familiar.
and then they calculate what the bang for the buck that the sponsor's getting in return. And Hamlin's, one of the top 5 guys. And so when you think of, big picture and you look at that, you have to say, whoever we're going to put in this car better bring us the same return on our investment, or, somewhere close in that, same kind of orbit as a Denny Hamlin. And quite frankly, right now, that's going to be a hard person to find.
I agree. I know, again, we've got to let you go here pretty quick. I got to ask you about that last lap deal. Racing, was it a racing deal to you? I mean, I thought it was, in my eyes, as a guy that's raced cars for a few years myself, I thought it was a racing deal. How did you look at it?
It's a completely racing deal. I mean, I believe that, I have to laugh at people at Twitter that said that, that it was that I insinuated that it was anything else, but I'll tell you what really kind of floored me. And even though it's after the fact, and even though at the time, Joey probably didn't believe that, or probably didn't know that Denny was on his way, being airlifted to the hosptal. You don't come out after a situation like that and say the driver got, so-and-so got what they deserve.
Right.
Because once those words come out of your mouth, you can't take them back. They were racing. I mean, I get that free and clear that they were, it was a last lap dash for the checkers, and what happened, happened. And quite frankly, your audience, my audience, race fans in general would not watch racing if there was not some element of danger involved. They know what the risk is going in.
Right.
But, the problem I had was after the fact that, the way it was put, now we're even, or, whatever I don't have my quote sheet in front of me, but I did know he said he got what he deserved. That kind of changes the scenario as to how you look at it. Did he go in there with intent? No, they were just racing. But the aftermath is you have a driver that was in the hospital who has been fitted for a brace. We do know that he does have a compression fracture of his lower spine. Not sure whether or not there are broken ribs or, whatever else. I know when I saw Denny Hamlin come out of the hospital on Monday night that he was grabbing the brace, grabbing his ribs, and had a really tough time breathing. And, that's really hard to watch. Even if you're a rider and you've covered this as long as I have, and you've seen a lot of really gnarly stuff, you hate seeing a guy that's just sitting there and gasping for air. I mean, that's tough for us all to take.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Well, we certainly wish Denny Hamlin the speediest recoveries. What do you make of Tony Stewart and his little tirade after the race with Joey Logano, claiming he ran him down into the infield?
Well, you saw it. I mean, he did, and he did it to Kurt Busch. I mean, if you watch Joey on the restarts, that was a move he repeated during the afternoon. And Tony Stewart, I think, he's pretty much spot on. I mean, it's kind of funny because somebody said, oh, you're a Tony homer. That's far from the case. I mean, Tony and I have had our moments over the years, and he's not somebody I'm going to have over my house for dinner. So,
right.
But I did think that, what he said is a sentiment that really echoes throughout the garage. I mean, look at the people who Joey Logano has ticked off over the years. Kevin Harvick, Ryan Newman, Jeff Gordon. I mean,
long list.
Why would you, if you're a string being 22-year-old kid, at 20 he was going after Harvick and Newman. I mean, why would you deal with those badasses when you know that they can pound you into the ground?
Let me ask you quickly: is there any animosity towards him because he was tabbed sliced bread, the next best thing, sliced bread, and all that? Was there any animosity towards him for that?
Well, that's NASCAR's marketing arm, and what kind of favor did they do Joey?
Because they overhyped him in my eyes. They way overhyped him.
It was total hype.
Yeah.
And on top of all of that, when you compare somebody like Joey Logano and you look at his numbers overall, his career numbers, what he's accomplished, bring up a kid named Kyle Larson next to Joey at the same age.
Hey, Lee.
Now compare the two of them, okay?
Yeah, right.
I mean, I hate that we're putting this kind of pressure on Kyle Larson, but my gosh, when Tony Stewart and Jeff Gordon say this kid is the next one coming, and then you watch him, I mean, first truck race, the first nationwide race, when you see what he's able to do and who he's racing with, other than his little skirmish during speed weeks in the late model race, my gosh, this kid, the potential is there. You want your sliced bread here.
Here he is.
Your kid.
Right.
So I think that when next time that we talk, or maybe even by Kansas, we're still going to be talking about Kyle Larson. If we're talking about Joey Logano, it might be because something happened with one of his peers, and you got to be able to get along with people
for the wrong reasons, right?
We'll start trying.
I mean, there's always that animosity, and yes, they're very competitive, and I didn't like this whole thing when the garage really started going buddy, and these guys are all hanging out and having a good time, because I think it takes away from what the prize is being able to race each other on Sunday. And then there's always these hurt feelings and things of that nature.
Right.
I mean, I think that's ridiculous. But on the other side of that, if they don't respect you, you're done.
Right. Hey, Lee, you remember last year when we had you in the booth out at Kansas Speedway, and I said, keep an eye on this kid, Kyle Larson. Remember that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he is the real deal, and it's exciting. In fact, he is the reason that I like to watch Nationwide Series races right now. He's just oozing with talent, and just can't wait. And I think the relationship that he's going to have with Trent Owens, I don't think Trent's going to get the credit as being the crew chief that he is, because Kyle Larson is known as this great talent, so that's probably not going to do Trent Owens much good. But I think their personalities is going to be a great mesh. I think could be one of the great ones down there. So,
but on the other side of that, Kyle still has a lot to learn about these cars.
I agree.
As if you listen to him on the radio, once you guys get to a racetrack this year, you will understand that there's still a ton he has to learn.
Right.
And I think the more he learns about these cars and what makes them work, and learns more about the rules, because every series has different rules.
Right.
I mean, the etiquette is the same, but as he's learning different things about what makes these cars work and what makes the nationwide cars work, I think that the learning curve is only going to escalate.
All right, go in and relax. I know it's time to relax right now, isn't it? Is that right? It's time to relax, so go in and relax. Folks, check out her Fox Sports exclusive sponsor Flap Cuts Martin's JGR Roll. Lee, thanks so much for being on the show. We'll be talking to you. See you in Kansas if we don't talk to you before then, okay?
Thanks, guys. Looking forward to it.
All right, Lee Spencer, foxsports.com, opinionated, love her. I love her work, man. It's probably my favorite work out there right now.
Yeah, and she says Tony Stewart was right.
Yeah. Wow.
He was right.
Right.
I just believe that Tony would have done the same thing in the last few minutes of the race to somebody else to try to win that race.
I think any driver that's ever strapped on a helmet and really been competitive in a race car that's had a chance to win a race would throw a block.